In this episode, we speak with Eric Byunn, co-founder and partner of Centana Growth Partners, a growth equity firm with deep relevant sector experience investing in and working with companies in financial services, FinTech, and related enterprise software. Eric is a 3-time awardee of GrowthCap's top software investors. He co-founded Centana in 2015 and previously worked over 20 years in growth equity and technology. He spent 13 years at FTV Capital, a multi-billion-dollar growth equity fund, where he was a partner, served on the management committee, and led investments in enterprise technology. In the earlier part of his career, Eric held positions at Netscape, mCFO, and McKinsey. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to follow.
RJ Lumba is the managing partner of GrowthCap and the executive chairman of Market Insight Media. He is the host of Growth Investor, a podcast featuring today's best investors, executives, and founders. In the minutes ahead, we'll uncover insights and strategies for accelerating growth and succeeding in business.
Eric, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's a delight to be with you.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So as I was prepping, I got really excited because I saw that you worked at Netscape. I don't think I've ever interviewed anyone, and I've done like 500 of these, that worked at Netscape. And what a cool company that was. I remember in college first discovering how to really use these web browsers, and Netscape was all the rage. Tell us about those early days.
Well, it was over 25 years ago, so forgive me if some of that has faded, but it was obviously a formative company in one of these every so often bubbles of innovation. And so right there at first version of the internet or the web, and there were a few thousand of us ultimately that kind of went through the doors there. But what I think is really most notable in hindsight about that, obviously the story's been written from a business and technology point of view, was given its sort of point as really a formative technology right at the beginning of one of these waves of innovation, the quality of talent, perhaps myself accepted, that Netscape was able to attract was truly amazing. So, people talk about the diasporas that have gone out from various seminal companies, and I'd hold the Netscape alumni up to any other single point that kind of diaspored out across innovation and technology or technology investing or any of those things as just a phenomenal place to interact, to jointly work on some tough problems and learn and enjoy in a really exciting time in the industry.
And then you went on to another well-known place, mCFO. How did you transition to that?
So my last position within Netscape, kind of heading into the acquisition by AOL, was running a portion of the personal finance channel. And at that time, Jim Clark, our great founder, he was thinking about what we would now call wealth tech and FinTech and really innovating in that space. And so he was looking for a team to staff his play in wealth tech and FinTech. And because I was in a role that was somewhat related to financial services, and I had some of that in my prior background as well, I was tapped to be the original head of product for that company. And that too was a wonderful experience.
Well, that's a very unique background for someone who today is co-founded and running a growth equity firm. Let's hit on first your stint. It's more than a stint. You were at FTV for like 15 years. Tell us about that. So you then decide from mCFO to become an investor.
Yeah. So this is all about personal choices and where sort of as an individual one wants to spend their time. And over the course of learning about the innovation economy, the technology economy, the Silicon Valley ecosystem, whatever set of words you want to use to describe that, I realized just from a purely personal point of view that there are a number of things that I liked about potentially being on the investor side. Again, so much credit to those who choose to pursue a full career of entrepreneurial or executive leadership with their career. But I decided at that time that I wanted to go join the investing side. We did have a national emergency to kind of jolt one's thinking right around that time because it was 2001. But luckily at that time, the original founders of what was originally called Financial Technology Ventures were kind enough to take a risk on someone who hadn't been an investor and bring me into their shop. And, the one thing I'll say about that was one of the very important things to me, which, continues to this day about a platform, about being part of a firm, is I was really looking for, a place where what that firm stood for, what that firm could offer, what that firm's expertise that they could bring to the network. Because, of course, I'd gotten to know a number of folks who were entrepreneurs over the course of my various prior stints. And I wanted a firm, a platform where really, in addition to me hopefully being a nice guy, that we could really bring some additional value add. And of course, whether that's my over a decade at what became FTV Capital and really just rooted in what was then a very core focus around what is now called FinTech and financial services investing and innovation in financial services, and then continuing on that perspective and that view of really wanting to bring something to the party beyond just the money and the investment terms, is something that's been consistent across my 2.5 decades as an investor.
And then tell us about the time where you decided to start your own firm. What was kind of the impetus? And was it like, I'd like to be an entrepreneur as a firm founder? What drew you into founding Centana?
Yeah, again, this is a set of personal choices. I and actually my co-founder here at Centana, we both had a good experience and learned so much at FTV and from our colleagues and in many cases mentors there. So I don't want to leave that out. But yes, of course, there's an entrepreneurial drive in many of us, and I won't discount that. FTV, had a clear strategy, which they've executed on now at the size of firm, as multi-billion-dollar firm, and some evolution in the type of investing and therefore the types of companies that they work with. And I and my co-founder really enjoyed the stage of investing, the types of companies, those, and I suspect we'll talk more about it, but where they've really gotten that initial product market fit, but still, frankly, have a lot of expansion and scaling ahead of them, ideally. And so that was where we had the most enjoyment and hopefully the most value add. And in respect to our investors, a very good track record of helping our investors make money, investing in that stage and that type of company. And it appeared that starting our own firm was the best way to continue doing that in a very consistent way.
And tell us more about how you view the fintech space today. I mean, it's been evolving in maybe some segments, it's been maturing, but there's always new companies popping up. How would you characterize fintech today?
So first, let me sort of definitionally note, we define fintech very much as what the original words meant, financial technology. So for us, while in some other sectors, you can sometimes get the feeling that it's defined as some other more tightly defined things, really the intersection of technology, software, and financial services and all of that overlap and every way that comes together in beautiful but also messy ways. We define all of that as fintech. So we cover everything from payments or wealth management or wealth tech to banking and capital markets and lending technologies and insurance technologies and all sorts of foundational infrastructure technologies that have particular relevance within the financial services sector. So I do want to define it that way. So when we talk about that now, what I'd say first of all is it has been and continues to be an enormous area. If you want to old quotes about, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. This is where all of these dollar flows are going through. And then, in fact, notably, it's pretty much all digital inherently, right? Even in the world of paper checks or old-fashioned passbooks or whatever, like it's still the information that's on those things that is the whole business, right? There's very rarely physical delivery of goods that matter. So it's all about information, which digitizes very, very nicely. And so lends itself to wave after wave of innovation. And so your question about what we think about fintech is we think there's been a steady progression of wave after wave of innovation in and around fintech for easily 25 or 30 years and probably longer than that. I will note that not unlike other areas of the economy, in 2021, early 22, there was what in hindsight can only be called a bit of a bubble around certain elements of fintech, not by any means around the whole category, but certain high profile elements that got a lot of hype and a lot of attention. They got honestly kind of frothy, but as those have sort of faded back and in to some degree, those have kind of dominated the press or the conventional wisdom, that wave after wave of innovation for financial services, financial institutions continue. If you think about it, the big banks, whether that's Main Street banks, Wall Street banks, big insurers, they have big IT and innovation budgets year after year after year. And that has stayed true. All the history and all the forecasts is that continues to grow inexorably as the volume of data that and information they're keeping track of continues to grow. The sophistication of the tools against that continue to grow. And so we see continued waves of innovation.
And then how do you think about maybe some of these more, not yet standard technologies or ones that are a little bit cuspy or there's some controversy around it? Cryptocurrency, blockchain, DeFi, all these other areas. Are those areas that you'll also invest into?
So our methodology is very, very consistent in that we are looking for technology and innovations that deliver solutions to well-defined problems that exist today that we're hearing from some aspect of the financial services industry or sector. And so many of our companies, many of the Centana portfolio companies do serve as part of their customer base, the crypto or the DeFi economy. And, there are many similarities around the sorts of supporting tools, infrastructure, technologies that you need to use that, as in, I hate to say this, but the more traditional elements of financial services. So that is something that we absolutely support. I would say there have been some pockets of some of those categories where, at least to us, it's been unclear what the clearly defined problem is that those technologies or solutions are solving. And so for those where there is a less clear problem, definition, solution kind of match, we have steered clear.
And when we think about investing or those growth equity firms that you would potentially compete with, who are maybe targeting similar companies, similar stage, similar check size, how would you best differentiate Centana versus the others that could be talking to the founder that you'd also like to partner with?
So the first thing I'd say is, we get asked this question in various forums all the time. And the market is so huge that even though I can intellectually come up with our competitors, and of course, for any given situation, there may be competitors, at a broad swath, that doesn't have the sort of ring that folks might imagine. Not too long ago, we surveyed a number of the companies that we'd engaged with, whether we invested or not, got some data around who else they'd been talking to and who else they'd be considering. And the conclusion from that is, wow, it's a big market. And so even though there are a lot of firms that ostensibly focus on some of the same areas, same stages, same amounts, there are just so many brilliant entrepreneurs and management teams and problems which remained unsolved or unaddressed that there's just too much landscape for us all to cover. And therefore, the competitive universe isn't maybe quite what it might seem from the outside. But a couple of things that we hang our hat on, first and foremost, is that expertise, knowledge, and network of financial services. So all the partners here have been investing in this ecosystem in the financial services space for multiple decades, obviously all spanning longer than Centana, since we are coming up on our 10-year anniversary. So we all have that deep experience of just spending decades of our life purely focused on this category. Everyone sits around a boardroom, everyone advises a management team, a CEO, a founder. Ours is very much rooted in having seen the ups and downs, what worked, what didn't work in companies selling into, through, around financial services. And so we aren't the only ones that are sort of the OG in this category, but when you match it against some of the other characteristics, there are very, very few of us. The second thing I would say is, to that point, we are focused on a particular stage at the time of investment. Obviously, our goal is always to grow these to be as successful and as large of a company as we can grow them to. But at the point of investment, they are all at this sort of early growth stage. They have an initial set of customers, they've proven product market fit, they have demonstrable traction, but they're doing it at relatively small scale. They haven't built an organization. They haven't built a approach that really solidifies that flywheel so that you get that natural momentum around growth. And all of our investments at the time of investment are at that stage. And so we're sort of the intersection of, we have the experience and the network to pattern match and help and bring value and connect folks to customers, advisors, kind of what have you, at that intersection of the stage that we focus on and the sector of companies that we focus on.
Excellent. Yeah, that's where I was going to go next is like when you then partner with a company, how do you then help them scale? It sounds like the network is a big part of it. Is that with executive recruiting? What kind of other things do you do to help strategically and operationally?
We touch upon all the different aspects that are required to grow when you have this consistency of sector and stage. For sure, one of the most consistent things is around helping to build out, supplement, strengthen the team overall. So executive recruiting, coaching, et cetera, can all be a piece of that. We have capabilities in-house and we use a number of external folks as well. The second thing is because of that expertise we have in financial services, we can bring a lot of expertise who can pattern match and have even broader networks than we do to the particular sector, particular problem that we are addressing. The other thing is thinking about how you set up the processes, the metrics. So our companies are generally going from a stage where they are, to more or less degree, largely founder or founders led, where the founder or founders are leading all the sales. They know virtually all of the customers, they know virtually all of the employees. And for sure, for all of our successful companies, by the time that the company is successful and realize some kind of outcome or even the next chapter, the company is too big, the customer list is too big, the partner list is too big for that founders to sort of know everyone. And so there is a really significant shift that goes on in how the company is run, again, in terms of processes, metrics, goals, all that sort of thing, in kind of moving to that stage where the founders are getting leverage in being able to affect the success of the company. And that's something we've seen over and over again and can both give advice and help avoid pitfalls.
Excellent. We're entering to the tail end of the conversation, but one question I wanted to ask before that was you touched on how enormous this whole market is of financial technology broadly defined. How do you go about sourcing or identifying companies, and how big do you estimate this market to be in terms of number of companies?
Oh, higher than I can count in terms of companies, dollar revenues, all that kind of thing. I mean, I just quite literally, the words that go with numbers that large. It is really very, very large. In terms of sourcing, the good news is these companies aren't hiding. They are looking to be found, right? I mean, every company inherently is trying to sell, and in trying to sell, they are trying to get found by customers and prospects. And so bluntly, it's not that hard to ride some of the same communications channels that the companies use to try to reach customers and prospects. So that's the sort of broad statement. Of course, we've been in the industry for a very, very long time, focused on these exact things. So lots of people know us or are one step removed. So we get both a good amount of inbound or our friends connecting us to interesting companies, and the reverse happens. There are a lot of companies that we discover or hear about one way or another, and then we can outbound to them, or we have one step removed through a good friend of the firm or advisor or something like that, we can get a good word kind of put in for us. So, there's no secret. It is work and research, but the good news is because we have focus and expertise on the spaces and the trends in our markets, we usually have something to say. We usually have a point of view, and most founders and executive teams find the dialogue interesting. And we're almost always just one or two connections away from most any company in this space.
Okay, last two questions. One is, can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
Oh, this is too easy of a question. I think we all have to refer to our parents, who were an amazing influence of both a combination of drive and grit and study and research, combined with a very human, hopefully generosity of spirit, which does describe my parents, which I hope to have taken as many cues from as possible.
Excellent. Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
Sure. I have a lot of passionate involvement for the Smithsonian Institution. So not knowing kind of where you are, as many folks know, it is partially supported by the federal government. It is America's institution, and I use that word institution deliberately because it both has the museums that everybody knows about, mostly on the East Coast, but it also is leading the way with pioneering research across so many sectors and is sort of, as the nation's institution, really embedded in many parts of the fabric. And while the federal government is a fantastic supporter, they could not do all the things that they do without the support of a great philanthropic effort, as well as a very large volunteer corps to both help. The mission of that is for the dissemination and increase of knowledge, which is just a mission I really, really believe in. And so that's a philanthropic organization that I'm delighted to be supporting.
Wonderful. Well, Eric, want to thank you again for taking the time for this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Good to chat with you today.